Welcome to Today in History, our channel, where we dive daily into the most fascinating, weird, and mind-blowing events that have happened throughout time. In addition to our daily videos, we also delve into the lesser-known aspects of history, exploring the events and actions that have shaped our world. Today, we're going to take a trip back to the medieval era, specifically late medieval England, where life was anything but ordinary. From strange laws to brutal punishments, you'll be shocked at just how bizarre life was during this time. Think you know what life was like back then? Well, buckle up. Here are 10 things you probably didn't know about late medieval England. Get permission from the king to get married. In our modern world, marriage is usually about love, romance, and personal choice. But back in late medieval England, particularly for the noble class, getting married wasn't just a matter of the heart. It was about politics. Marriages between nobles were strategic, alliances that could change the course of kingdoms. For these unions to be official, many nobles needed the king's permission. Imagine that. You meet someone you love, but instead of planning a wedding, you had to first consult the crown. The king had the power to approve or deny a marriage because these unions impacted political alliances, family wealth, and even the balance of power in the country. Marriage wasn't about finding a soulmate, it was a tool of control. For peasants, though, it was simpler. A couple didn't even need a priest, just a mutual agreement to marry, and they were considered bound for life. Still, the king's influence loomed large for anyone connected to the noble class. Medieval animals were tried and punished for their crimes. Can you imagine a pig being put on trial? Well, in late medieval England, animals were more than just farm creatures. They were potential criminals. This bizarre practice saw animals like pigs, rats, and even insects being tried in public courts. Here's how it worked. Animals were accused of causing harm, destroying property, or even committing acts of violence. These weren't secret trials either. They were open to the public, with lawyers, evidence, and sometimes even a jury. Medieval society believed the world was divinely ordered, so any disturbance, whether human or animal, was seen as a spiritual violation. If an animal was found guilty, it could be exiled or executed. Yes, animals faced the death penalty just like people. Execution, dragged, hanged, and then mutilated. When it came to punishment, late medieval England didn't mess around. One of the most brutal execution methods was being hanged, drawn, and quartered. This gruesome punishment was reserved for high treason, and it was designed to send a clear message to anyone daring to challenge the crown. First, the prisoner was dragged through the streets, tied to a horse, with crowds watching in horror. Next, they were hanged, but not until death, just enough to make them suffer. Then came the mutilation. The condemned person's insides were removed, burned, and their body cut into 4 parts. These body parts were displayed in different areas of the kingdom to remind everyone of the consequences of treason, a brutal yet effective form of public punishment. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this dive into the strange world of medieval history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to never miss an update on more fascinating stories like these. Horses used to stretch a victim until they were ripped apart. Medieval England was notorious for its creative torture methods, and one of the most terrifying was the rack. This was a torture device designed to stretch the human body to its breaking point. Victims were tied down to a wooden frame, and a crank was slowly turned to stretch their limbs further and further. The result? Excruciating pain as bones and joints were pushed to their limits. But sometimes, medieval torturers wanted to make things even more gruesome. In extreme cases, horses were used instead of cranks. Each limb was tied to a different horse, and when the horses were spurred in opposite directions, they would literally tear the person apart. This method was a horrifying symbol of medieval justice and a reminder that confessions, often came under unimaginable duress. Medieval nobles emptied their toilets into a courtyard. You might think castles in medieval times were all grandeur, luxury, and splendor, but when it came to sanitation, the reality was much more grim. Nobles had privy chambers, or medieval toilets, but these weren't the kind we're familiar with today. These privy chambers were small rooms that jutted out from castle walls, and the waste went straight into the courtyard or a moat below. Imagine the stench that would come from waste building up throughout the day. Castles often had workers called gong farmers, whose job was to clean out all the human waste at night. These poor laborers had to wade through excrement and carry it away, one of the most undesirable jobs of the medieval period. For the common folk who lived outside of castles, waste disposal wasn't much better, often ending up in the streets. Medieval medicine, cures that were deadlier than diseases. If you thought medieval life was tough, wait until you hear about medieval medicine. Back then, doctors didn't understand diseases in the way we do now. Instead, they believed in balancing the body's humors. 4 fluids they thought controlled health: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you were sick, the treatment could be just as dangerous as the disease itself. Bloodletting, draining blood from the body, was a common treatment for many ailments. People also used leeches to suck out blood, or even drank mercury to try to cure illnesses. The irony? These so-called treatments often made things worse, leading to infections, poisoning, or death. Marrying young, child brides were common. In late medieval England, marrying young wasn't just common, it was practically expected, especially among the noble class. Marriage wasn't about love, it was about alliances, power, and property. Girls as young as 12 or 14 were often married off to men they had never met, all to benefit their family's political and economic standing. These child brides had little say in their futures. Their lives were dictated by their family's ambitions, and their marriages were strategic. For many young girls, their wedding day marked the beginning of a life filled with duties and expectations far beyond their years. Sumptuary laws, dress codes to control society. Imagine being told what you could and couldn't wear based on your social rank. In late medieval England, sumptuary laws were designed to do exactly that. These laws dictated what people from different classes could wear, and they were strictly enforced. If you were a peasant, you had to stick to basic fabrics like wool and linen. Nobles, on the other hand, were allowed to wear luxurious fabrics like silk and velvet. Even colors were controlled. Certain hues, like purple, were reserved exclusively for royalty. The purpose of these laws? To keep everyone in their place and ensure that no one dressed above their station. Breaking these laws wasn't just a fashion mistake. It could lead to severe punishments. Clothes weren't just a form of self-expression. They were a way to maintain social control. Feasts for kings, bread for peasants. We often imagine grand medieval feasts, with kings and nobles dining on the finest foods. But that wasn't the reality for most people. While the elite indulged in rich meats, exotic fruits, and rare spices, the peasants had a much simpler diet. Their daily meal was pottage, a basic stew made from grains and vegetables. Meat was a luxury that peasants rarely enjoyed, and bread was the staple food. These lavish banquets weren't just about eating. They were a way for nobles to show off their wealth and power. Feasts were political events where alliances were made and relationships were strengthened, while peasants outside the castle walls often struggled just to get enough to eat. Trial by ordeal. God decides your fate. Forget courts and judges. Justice in late medieval England was often left to God. One of the most common forms of justice was the trial by ordeal, where it was believed that God would reveal the truth through miraculous means. In an ordeal by fire, the accused would walk a certain distance while holding a red-hot iron. If their burns healed without infection, they were deemed innocent. If they didn't, they were guilty. There was also the ordeal by water, where the accused was thrown into a body of water. If they floated, They were guilty because the water rejected them. If they sank, they were considered innocent, but might drown in the process. These trials were seen as a way to let divine intervention determine guilt or innocence, but they often led to terrifying outcomes. And there you have it. 10 strange, shocking, and downright bizarre facts about late medieval England. From animal trials to brutal executions and beyond, life back then was full of surprises. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the strange and fascinating world of late medieval England, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more mind-blowing historical insights. Want to explore even more weird and wonderful moments from history? Ring the bell so you're the first to know when we upload new content. And don't forget to share your favorite fact in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and let's continue this journey through history together.